Okay, so we're going to hear from Jill, the pre-recorded video, and I'm just going to get the title. Is Renting Wombs and Buying Babies.
So a couple of weeks ago, I was part of an expert panel on surrogacy, which with the UN Special Rapporteur Reem El Salem and women from all over the world. It was on Zoom. And I got invited to participate because the Women's Declaration International New Zealand and Women's Rights Party, we did a joint response to their call that was put out because the Special Rapporteur is preparing a report on surrogacy that she's going to present to the UN General Assembly in early October. And it sounds like a big deal, and indeed it is, because out of this process could become recommendations for international action to curb or ban the trafficking of women and babies through the surrogacy industry, which, of course, at the heart of it internationally is about renting wombs and buying babies. So there was about 30 panellists from all over Europe and South America, the UK, Australia, and most of them were opposed to surrogacy as a form of exploitation of women and children. The exception was a man from an Australian group called Rainbow Families, who has a 4-year-old girl with his partner through surrogacy, and he explained that while he was in the meeting, his daughter was with her other dad in ballet class, that I'm sure other dad is thought to be very stunning and brave. Anyway, we discussed celebrity surrogacy and the glorification of, what's the deliberate act of taking a baby from its mother to satisfy career ambitions and personal preferences and the need for status symbols. And of course, there are very well-known celebrities who have had children by surrogacy. Some of them have had 2 or more surrogate-born children, and many of them are single male parents or gay male couples and aged in their 50s or beyond. So social reasons, including celebrity influences, was identified as a factor in the big increase in surrogacy. The topics for discussion were divvied up 1 hour at a time, the first being the children's right to know and be cared for by their parents, including a child's right to information on being born through surrogacy. In our policy, the Women's Rights Party, we say that children are not a commodity to be handed over as part of a transactional arrangement, and thus we support our country's ban on commercial surrogacy. I reported that the New Zealand government has been considering new surrogacy arrangements since 2021 under the then Labor government, and the proposed legislation aimed to simplify surrogacy processes and establish clear mechanisms to enforce surrogacy arrangements. We've strongly opposed that original Labor bill because it didn't protect either the interests of the birth mother or the baby, and failed to recognise that even in utero an unborn baby is already interacting with her or his birth mother physically and psychologically. But this new revised bill at least now puts the surrogate-born child at the centre, which has come out of the Law Commission looking at the original bill. And so one thing that we do have is that the children, all of those actually involved in the surrogacy arrangement, have the opportunity to learn about the genetic and gestational origins and whakapapa. So, but there is a mechanism to allow them to access that information in the future, but it's restricted. It's on a restricted part of the Register of Births, Deaths and Marriages. So it's proposed in the revised bill that until the birth mother of a surrogate-born baby relinquishes her legal parentage of the baby, she's the sole parent and guardian of the baby. However, in the case of an approved surrogacy that happens through a surrogacy service, like a fertility provider services, it's proposed that the intending parents, commissioning parents, could be additional guardians of the baby until the parentage of the babies transferred, and that to us seems inconsistent with the time period that's provided for the birth mother to fully consider her decision. So the second question we're asked to consider is the question of consent of a surrogate mother, and to what extent, under what conditions, it can be free and informed. So New Zealand law does not currently afford any automatic rights to the intending parents of a baby born of surrogacy. So at the time of birth, the child's legal parents are the birth mother and her partner, if he or she agrees, and a formal adoption process is required to complete the arrangement. You can't actually enforce any previous agreement that's been made. For example, go to the court to get a compliance order. So we've supported that current adoption process because it does at least provide for the interests of the birth mother as the first legal parent, with rights to her reproductive autonomy and freedom from exploitation during her pregnancy and birth. By contrast with the current adoption process, the original government bill, Labor government bill, would have provided the intending parents with automatic legal status at the point custody of the child was transferred, which could have been at the birth. So even in this current revised bill, the birth mother cannot relinquish her legal right to the baby until after a 7-day period, which we don't think really is enough. After all, in New Zealand, if you get a puppy from a breeder, you can't get it till it's 8 weeks old. So human babies are treated worse than puppies. But some panellists didn't agree that we should even be engaging in discussions to legislate and liberalise surrogacy arrangements, because that normalises a practice and legitimates a practice that inevitably violates women's physical and reproductive integrity. So we agree that the surrogacy arrangements that are currently being proposed here can never eliminate the coercive element inherent in the practice of surrogacy, even in the case of altruistic arrangements. So in our recent round of Women's Rights Party regional meetings, one woman talked about how her sister couldn't have a baby, and she was very worried that her sister would ask her, because she would feel obliged to carry a baby for her sister, even though she herself had already had 3 and didn't want any further pregnancies. So she was really relieved when her sister didn't ask. And other members who had been adopted at birth said little thought's given to the long-term interests of surrogate-born babies or their birth mothers, and they likened surrogacy to the widespread practice in the 1950s and 1960s of taking babies of unwed teen mothers from their mothers, from their mothers at birth, and putting the babies up for adoption. And many of those babies, now adults and in our meetings, and the mothers too, who were 15 or 16 at the time, suffer intense grief to this day, even where the adoptive parents provide a loving home. So, but the fact is that New Zealand's not alone in reviewing our surrogacy laws. As you know, that's happening in Australia and in the UK. And so we think we should engage in the legislative process to try and protect the rights of birth mothers and babies. So, and that's because there's a big push by commissioning parents to make sure that the arrangements that they make are enforceable. And also, it's possible that birth mothers, surrogate mothers, may fear that the intended parents will not assume responsibility for their baby, especially the babies born with a disability or of the wrong sex. So it's become a real problem because of the development of technologies such as assisted reproductive technology and in vitro fertilization, which have opened the door to a boom in surrogacy involving egg harvesting and embryo transfers, where the surrogate mother may be carrying a baby that's not genetically related to her, which wouldn't have been the case in the past. And that raises very significant ethical issues for women, relating to their reproductive freedom, health, and well-being. So the third topic we were asked to consider was policy recommendations for the report, and there was at time heated debate as we discussed abolition of surrogacy, with some suggesting criminalising the commissioning parents, similar to the Nordic model of criminalising buyers and prostitution. I got the impression, though, that most supported bans on international surrogacy from countries like New Zealand, where commercial surrogacy is illegal. But even here, of course, the presence of fertility services promoting surrogacy services on our TV screens to those with the financial ability to pay for such services means that surrogacy is a commercial service and the women and babies commodities in a commercial transaction through the third party, that is the fertility service. It was good to hear from the Spanish and Italian panelists who reported that surrogacy is illegal in both of their countries, and in fact several EU countries prohibit surrogacy, but of course citizens routinely skirt the ban by hiring surrogates in foreign countries and registering the children abroad. And so we had from Italy, they were very strong in talking about how the government had cracked down on having a baby abroad and making that a criminal act. And Amparo will know that surrogacy has been prohibited in Spain since 2006, but recently the Spanish government has banned its embassies from registering children born through surrogates in foreign countries. So in New Zealand, the authorities do warn that international surrogacy is a real problem, and we have a process by which children born through international surrogacy don't automatically meet the requirements of citizenship in New Zealand, and even if there's a genetic link between one or both of the intending parents. And the child will in most cases only have temporary immigration status in New Zealand until such time as an adoption process has been completed. So the argument was made that it was up to countries with stronger regulations to take action to ban their citizens from accessing surrogacy in permissive countries, as Spain and Italy have done. Surrogate mothers, of course, often live in countries where there is widespread poverty, weak regulations and laws around surrogacy, and poor health standards, which increases the risk of humanitarian problems, where the surrogate mother and child may be vulnerable and their rights not well protected. So just to conclude, having a baby, of course, via surrogacy is not a human right. I think that point was really clearly made. There is no societal duty to provide babies to those who cannot have their own children, and certainly no requirement on poorer countries to provide babies for citizens of wealthier nations. I like this comment from one of the panel participants, Anna Kerr, who's well known to WDI, who pointed out, oh no, it wasn't her, somebody else, that where international adoption was banned in many countries, the market dried up and orphanages were empty. Anna's comment was this: if there was no market for surrogacy, this would not be a problem. We need a public health campaign raising awareness of the unique importance of the attachment between a mother and child, the significant risks of child sex abuse, and the important safeguarding role played by mothers in keeping children safe.